You belong with me. The Alpha King told the Omega beaten for bearing daughters. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Elena Carter, a woman from a forgotten family, had always known the weight of being different. In the world she lived in, women like her were looked down upon, especially when they couldn't give their families what society deemed as valuable heirs. Her life had been marked by disappointment, a constant reminder that she was nothing more than a broken Omega. For years, she was scorned for giving birth to daughters instead of sons, and the looks, the whispers, the disapproving gazes of the pack's elders were a constant thorn in her side. Today, however, was different. Today, the humiliation was more public, more severe. The ritual had begun as usual. An Omega who failed to produce the proper heirs was to be ridiculed and removed from the family, cast aside like unwanted refuse. Elena stood in the center of the gathering, her body stiff with the weight of shame, her daughters by her side, watching helplessly as the pack made their judgments. The whispers around her grew louder, more intense. Not even a single son, they muttered. What use is she? A disgrace. Elena's hands clenched at her sides, but she kept her gaze straight ahead. She would not show weakness, not even now. She had given everything for her daughters, and though society had rejected her, she still held on to her dignity. The mocking continued until a powerful voice rang out, cutting through the noise like a blade. Enough! The crowd fell silent as they turned to see a tall, imposing figure emerge from the shadows. Dorian Blackwood, the Alpha King, stood in the doorway. His presence alone commanded attention, his every step filled with the weight of authority. The air shifted as his gaze swept over the crowd. His eyes, cold and calculating, landed on Elena, and for a moment, she felt like the world had stopped. She had heard of him, of course, everyone had. The Alpha King, feared and revered, a man of unmatched power, known for his ruthless leadership. Yet, it was his eyes that struck her the most. In them, she saw something unexpected. Compassion? Or perhaps a recognition that none of the pack had ever shown her. Dorian stepped forward, his voice resonating with authority as he addressed the pack. She is mine, he declared, his tone firm and unyielding. Anyone who dares insult her again will answer to me. The crowd, stunned into silence, could only watch as the Alpha King approached Elena. His words were a declaration of ownership, but more than that, they were a promise. A promise that she was no longer alone, no longer invisible. Elena's heart raced as she met his gaze, confusion and disbelief mixing with something else. Relief, perhaps, or hope. Hope that after all these years, after all the pain, someone had finally seen her for what she was worth. And just like that, in front of the entire pack, the Alpha King claimed her. She wasn't just Elena Carter anymore. She was his, and the pack would have to bow to his will. Her life had just changed, and with it, so had the lives of her daughters. No longer would they live in the shadow of rejection. No longer would they be cast aside. Elena had found her protector, and Dorian Blackwood, the Alpha King, had found his mate. Elena stood frozen in place as the weight of Dorian Blackwood's words sank in. The Alpha King had claimed her, in front of the entire pack, with such certainty and power that the air itself seemed to shift. Her heart pounded in her chest, the sound deafening in her ears. She had never imagined something like this could happen, never dreamed that someone, especially someone like him, would stand up for her. For years, she had been nothing more than a disappointment, a woman cast aside because she couldn't give her family the heirs they wanted. And now, the most powerful man in the realm had declared her his. Elena glanced around, half expecting someone to challenge him, to speak out against his claim. But no one did. The pack stood in stunned silence, their gazes fixed on the Alpha King in her, as if they were waiting for the world to turn back to normal. But it didn't. Dorian Blackwood's presence alone had shifted everything. Elena couldn't remember the last time she had felt like this. Powerful, seen, important. She had spent so long hiding in the shadows, enduring the whispers and the rejection, that now, In the face of Dorian's protection, she couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. She had never felt anything close to this kind of power, not even when she had fought for the well-being of her daughters. Her mind raced with questions. Why had Dorian done this? What had he seen in her that made him protect her so fiercely? Was it pity? Or something more? Come with me, Dorian said, his voice calm, but there was an undeniable authority in his tone. He turned and began walking away, his footsteps strong and sure. Elena stood for a moment, unsure of what to do. She looked at her daughters, their faces filled with confusion and awe. "Mama, are we going with him?" her youngest daughter, Emily, asked quietly. Elena nodded, her heart swelling with pride. "Yes, we are," she whispered, more to herself than to Emily. She had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had something to fight for. Dorian led her to a large, imposing carriage, the black and gold insignia of the Blackwood family emblazoned on the door. The carriage was grand, with intricate carvings on the wood and plush velvet seats inside. Elena climbed in first, her daughters following close behind. The door shut with a soft thud, and the carriage began to move, the rhythmic sound of the wheels against the cobblestones filling the silence. Elena sat back, still processing everything that had just happened. She couldn't quite believe it. She had always been taught that alphas were above the law, that they ruled with an iron fist and showed no mercy. But here she was, sitting beside the Alpha King, a man who had publicly declared her his. Dorian sat across from her, his gaze fixed on the road ahead, but Elena could feel the tension in the air. It was as if he was waiting for her to speak, to ask the questions that were undoubtedly swirling in her mind. "Why?" Elena finally asked, her voice shaky but determined. "Why did you do that? Why did you protect me?" Dorian turned his gaze to her then, his eyes cold, yet there was something softer behind them, something Elena couldn't quite place. "Because you are mine," he said simply, as if that explained everything. Elena blinked, stunned by the simplicity of his answer. "But why me?" she pressed. I'm not what you're used to. I'm just an Omega, a failure." Dorian's expression softened slightly, though his voice remained steady. "You are not a failure, Elena. You are strong, stronger than you know, and I see that strength." Elena shook her head. "I don't understand." "You don't have to," Dorian replied. "Just know that you are not alone anymore. I will protect you, and I will protect your daughters." Elena didn't know what to say. She had spent so long fighting for her daughters, for their future, that the idea of someone else protecting them, someone with so much power, felt foreign. But in that moment, as she looked at Dorian, she realized something. She didn't have to do it all alone anymore. She didn't have to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. Dorian had given her something she had never had before: hope. Hope for herself. Hope for her daughters. And maybe, just maybe, hope for the future. The carriage continued on its journey, and for the first time in years, Elena allowed herself to close her eyes and rest. She didn't know what awaited her at the end of this road, but she knew one thing: it would be different. She was no longer the broken Omega. She was Dorian Blackwood's mate. As the days passed, Elena found herself adjusting to a life she never thought possible. The grand palace that had once seemed like a distant dream was now her home. The walls of the castle were lined with tapestries that told stories of battles long past, of victories and legends. The hallways echoed with the footsteps of servants and warriors, their faces filled with respect and awe as they acknowledged her presence. She could hardly believe how quickly everything had changed. Elena had spent so many years hiding in the shadows, enduring the cruelty of others, that she was unprepared for the kindness she was now receiving. Every corner of the palace felt unfamiliar, yet the weight of the Alpha King's protection gave her a sense of security she had never known. At night, she would lie awake in the grand bedchamber that Dorian had assigned her, the sound of the wind rustling outside the windows a comforting lullaby. Her daughters slept soundly beside her, and for the first time in years, Elena allowed herself to truly rest. Dorian had kept his word. He was everything the stories said he would be: powerful, authoritative, and unyielding in his protection of her and her children. Yet there was something more to him, something softer hidden beneath his stoic exterior. Elena had seen glimpses of it in the quiet moments they shared, when he would speak to her not as the Alpha King, but as a man who had seen too much pain in his life. One evening, As Elena sat by the fire, watching the flames dance and flicker, Dorian entered the room. His expression was unreadable as always, but there was a slight tension in his posture. "Elena," he said, his voice low but steady. "I need to speak with you." Elena looked up from her thoughts, meeting his gaze. "Of course," she replied, setting aside the book she had been reading. Dorian stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know this is all new to you. The palace, the position you now hold, it's a lot to adjust to. But I want you to know something." He paused, taking a breath as if choosing his words carefully. "You're not just my mate because of the bond we share. You are important, Elena. You are more than just a symbol of power. You are my equal." Elena's heart fluttered at his words. For so long, she had been made to feel less than, like her worth was tied only to what she could give. But here was Dorian, the most powerful man in the realm, telling her that she was more than that. She wasn't just a wife, a mother, or a possession. She was his equal. It was a concept she could barely wrap her mind around. "I don't know what to say," she admitted softly. "I've never been treated this way. I've always been told I was worthless." Dorian's gaze softened, and for the first time, Elena saw a flicker of something vulnerable in his eyes. "The world can be cruel," he said quietly. "But you are not what they say you are, Elena. You are strong. And that strength is what I admire most about you." Elena blinked, feeling a lump rise in her throat. She had never imagined that the Alpha King, a man known for his cold, unyielding nature, would speak to her with such tenderness. She wasn't used to being valued for her strength, for her will. She had spent years fighting to prove her worth to the world, and here, in the safety of the palace, Dorian had shown her that she didn't have to fight anymore. He saw her for who she truly was. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Dorian nodded, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "You are welcome here, Elena. Always." As the days turned into weeks, Elena began to find her place in the palace. She no longer felt like a stranger in her own home. She spent time with her daughters, teaching them how to read and write, sharing stories of her childhood, and playing games that filled their days with laughter. Elena had been given a second chance, not just for herself, but for her daughters. They would grow up knowing that they were loved and respected, something Elena had never had as a child. One afternoon, as she walked through the palace gardens, Dorian joined her. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden light over the flowers and trees. The air smelled sweet, and for a moment, Elena felt a peace she had never known. Dorian's presence beside her was a quiet comfort. "I've been thinking," he said, breaking the silence, "about our future, about what comes next." Elena turned to him, her curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" "I've spent so many years focused on ruling, on maintaining power, that I never stopped to think about what I truly want. What I need," he explained, his voice low but steady. Elena's heart skipped a beat as she realized where this conversation was heading. "And what is it that you need?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dorian stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "I need you, Elena. I need you by my side, not just as my mate, but as my partner. I want you to help me lead, to make decisions together. This kingdom, it's not just mine anymore. It's ours." Elena stared at him, the weight of his words sinking in. She had never imagined that she would be offered such a position, such a partnership. And yet, here it was. She wasn't just a bystander in his life. She was going to be part of the decision-making, part of the future of the kingdom. "Are you sure?" Elena asked, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm not sure I've ever been prepared for something like this." Dorian reached out, gently cupping her face in his hands. "You've been prepared all your life, Elena. You've already shown me what true strength is." As they stood there, under the setting sun, Elena felt something stir within her. It was a sense of purpose, of belonging, something she had never felt before. And as Dorian leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead, she realized that for the first time in her life, she truly belonged. To him, to herself, to the future they would build together. As the days went by, Elena continued to adapt to her new life, one that she could hardly have imagined just weeks ago. The Grand Palace was now her home, and with every passing day, the unfamiliarity began to feel more like a promise of the future. Dorian's protection had given her a sense of peace, but she had come to realize that it wasn't just about the safety he provided. It was the way he made her feel, valued, important. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like an afterthought, a mere bystander in her own existence. She was seen, truly seen, by the man who had the world at his feet. Elena spent her mornings walking through the palace gardens, taking in the beauty of the flowers and the trees that seemed to breathe life into every corner. Her daughters, once quiet and withdrawn, had begun to blossom in this new environment. They played freely in the gardens, their laughter ringing through the air like music. The weight of their former life, filled with rejection and shame, had lifted, replaced by the love and protection Dorian had promised. One afternoon, Elena found herself standing in front of a large mirror in her chambers. She hadn't seen herself this way in years, strong, confident, and more than just a mother. She was beginning to embrace the woman she had always been, a woman who was more than the sum of her struggles. Dorian had given her that gift, whether he realized it or not. She was no longer defined by her past, by the whispers of others or the judgment she had faced. She was more than a broken Omega. She was Elena, Dorian's mate, and that was enough. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, turning toward the sound. The door opened, and there stood Dorian, his tall frame filling the doorway. He looked as commanding as ever, his usual stoic expression masking whatever thoughts lingered in his mind. "Elena," he began, his voice steady, "I need you to come with me. There's something I want to show you." Elena nodded, her curiosity piqued. "Of course," she replied, walking toward him. They left the room together, walking through the long hallways of the palace, their footsteps echoing off the stone walls. Elena couldn't help but notice the way the servants and guards stood straighter as they passed, their respect for Dorian evident. But today, they also looked at Elena differently. There was no longer pity in their eyes. Instead, there was admiration. She was no longer the outcast, the Omega who had been cast aside. She was a queen in her own right, and her presence was just as important as Dorian's. They reached the grand hall, where a large, ornate door stood before them. Dorian pushed it open, revealing a stunning view of the kingdom beyond. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden light across the vast landscape. Elena gasped, taking in the beauty before her. "This is incredible," she whispered. Dorian stepped beside her, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "This is what I wanted to show you," he said softly. "This kingdom, this land, it's ours. But more than that, it's for you and the future we will build together. The decisions we make will shape not just our lives, but the lives of everyone here." Elena turned to look at him, her heart swelling. She had always felt like an outsider, someone who didn't belong, someone who had no power. But now, standing beside Dorian, she understood. She was part of something greater than herself. "I never imagined something like this," Elena admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "I never thought I would be here, in this position." Dorian looked at her, his eyes intense yet filled with warmth. "You deserve this, Elena. You deserve all of this and more. You've always been strong. You just needed someone to see that strength." Elena reached out, her hand brushing against his. "And I'm here because of you," she said softly. Dorian smiled, a rare, genuine smile that softened the edges of his usually stern features. "And I'm here because of you," he replied. The moment lingered between them, a shared understanding that needed no words. Elena knew that they were more than just a king and his mate. They were partners, equal in every sense of the word. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Elena felt a sense of calm wash over her. She had found her place in the world. She had found her home. With Dorian, she was no longer defined by her past. She was free to be who she truly was, and for the first time, that was enough. As Elena stood by Dorian's side, the weight of everything they had been through settled within her. It had been a journey filled with unexpected turns, with pain and triumph. But more than anything, it had been about discovery. She had discovered her own strength, the depth of her resilience, and the power of a love that could break all boundaries. She wasn't just the woman who had been cast aside. She wasn't just the mother of daughters. She was Elena Blackwood, mate to the Alpha King, and she was finally beginning to see herself as more than what the world had labeled her. The sun had set completely, and the stars began to appear in the vast sky above them. Elena and Dorian stood on the balcony, looking out over the kingdom they would share. The palace lights below twinkled like distant stars, a reflection of the hope that now lived in her heart. She had found something precious here, something she had never thought was possible: peace. "You're quiet," Dorian said, his voice breaking through her thoughts. He had been gazing at the stars, but now he turned his eyes to her, waiting for her response. Elena smiled softly, the feeling of contentment settling deep in her chest. "I was just thinking," she began, her voice gentle, "about how far we've come, about how different everything feels now." Dorian nodded, his gaze softening. "I never imagined this for us either," he admitted, taking a step closer to her. "But sometimes, life gives us what we need, even if we don't realize it at first." Elena looked up at him, seeing the truth in his words. She had been so focused on surviving, on protecting her daughters, that she hadn't realized the depth of the bond they shared, or the strength she carried within herself. She had fought so hard for so long, but now, she could finally let go of that weight and embrace the future with Dorian. "It's strange," Elena said, her eyes meeting his. "How something so unexpected can change everything. I thought I would always be the outcast, always fighting to prove I was worthy of respect." Dorian's hand reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You were always worthy, Elena," he said softly. "It just took someone to see it. And I see you. All of you. The woman who is strong, the woman who loves fiercely, and the woman who deserves every bit of happiness that comes her way." His words filled her with warmth, and for the first time, Elena allowed herself to believe them. She wasn't just someone to be protected anymore. She was someone to be cherished, someone who mattered. "Thank you," Elena whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Dorian smiled, his expression soft yet filled with determination. "You don't need to thank me. You deserve this. You deserve everything I can give you, and more." Elena's heart swelled, and she found herself reaching out to take his hand. "Together," she said, her voice steady with newfound confidence. "We'll face whatever comes, together." Dorian's eyes shone with approval, and he gently squeezed her hand. "Together," he agreed. The words settled between them, a promise they both knew they would keep. As the night deepened and the world around them grew quiet, Elena felt a deep sense of contentment. She was no longer just a woman struggling to survive. She was part of something greater, something she had never imagined, and she had a partner beside her who would always fight by her side. The road ahead was unknown, but for the first time, Elena wasn't afraid. She had found her place in the world, and that place was beside Dorian. And with him, she knew that no matter what came next, she would never be alone again. The next few weeks passed. In a blur of adjustment and discovery, Elena was slowly finding her place in the palace, in the life she had been thrust into. Dorian had kept his promise, and for the first time, Elena allowed herself to believe in the future. The weight of her past, the years of rejection and shame, seemed to fade into the background, replaced by a new reality that was hard to accept, but even harder to ignore. The days were spent learning about her new responsibilities, both as the Alpha King's mate and as a mother who would help shape the future of their family. Dorian was always by her side, guiding her through the intricacies of palace life, showing her what it meant to rule, not as a subject, but as an equal. Elena had always thought that power came with cruelty, that those who held it were untouchable, cold, and indifferent. But Dorian had proven her wrong. He was powerful, yes, but he was also kind, compassionate, and fair. He had been the first to show her that being seen for who she truly was, without judgment, was something she deserved. Elena often found herself reflecting on this new life. She had gone from being a woman who fought for survival to a woman who now fought for something greater, her family's future. The realization filled her with a sense of purpose she had never known before. She wasn't just protecting her daughters anymore. She was now part of something bigger, something that could change the course of their lives. It was an evening like any other when Dorian came to her with a new proposal. Elena had been reading in her chambers when he knocked on the door, his usual presence felt even in the way the air seemed to shift around him. "Elena, we need to talk," he said, his voice calm but firm. Elena set the book down and stood to greet him. "What is it?" she asked, sensing the gravity in his tone. Dorian stepped inside, his expression serious but not distant. "I've been thinking about the future," he began. "About the kingdom, about the legacy we'll leave behind. I want us to be partners in this. Not just in name, but in action." Elena's heart skipped a beat. They had talked about leading together before, but this felt different. This wasn't just about their personal relationship. This was about the entire kingdom. "What are you asking?" she asked, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts in her mind. Dorian moved closer, his gaze unwavering. "I want you to take a more active role in the kingdom's decisions. Not just as my mate, but as my co-ruler. You have the strength, the wisdom, and the compassion to help guide this kingdom. I believe in you, Elena." Elena's mind raced. The weight of his words was undeniable. This was more than just a gesture. It was a declaration that she was not just an accessory to his power, but a true partner in it. "Are you sure?" Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. I'm not like you, Dorian. I don't have the experience, the training. I've spent so many years just surviving." Dorian's hand gently cupped her cheek, his touch warm and reassuring. "That's what makes you perfect for this," he said. "You understand what it means to fight for what matters. You've fought for your family, for your daughters, and now you'll fight for the people of this kingdom. We will do this together." Elena's breath caught in her throat. The idea of stepping into such a role, of leading alongside Dorian, was overwhelming. But at the same time, it felt right. She had spent so long in the shadows, unsure of her place in the world. And now, Dorian was giving her the opportunity to stand beside him, to help build the future they both envisioned. "Okay," Elena said, her voice steady now, filled with a newfound strength. "I'll do it. I'll stand with you, Dorian. As your partner, in every sense of the word." Dorian's eyes softened with pride. "I knew you would," he said, his voice full of warmth. "Together, we will build something that will last." As Elena stood beside him, her hand resting in his, she felt the weight of the responsibility settle into her heart. This was not just a partnership in name, but a true partnership, one that would change the course of their lives and the lives of their people. She had found her place, not just as a mother or a wife, but as a leader. And with Dorian by her side, she knew that together, they would face whatever came next, and they would do it with strength, compassion, and the unwavering belief that they were meant to rule, not alone, but together. The following weeks were filled with new challenges and triumphs as Elena and Dorian settled into their roles. As co-rulers, they spent their days meeting with advisors, discussing matters of the kingdom, and planning for the future. Elena was no longer just a passive observer. She had become an integral part of the decision-making process, her voice just as important as Dorian's in shaping the future of their people. It wasn't always easy. At first, Elena struggled with the weight of responsibility, unsure if she was truly ready for such a significant role. But Dorian was always there, guiding her when she needed it, offering support and wisdom, but never overshadowing her decisions. He trusted her judgment, and that trust gave her the confidence to rise to the occasion. The people of the kingdom began to take notice of the change. No longer was Elena seen as just the Alpha King's mate. She was a leader in her own right, and her compassion, her understanding of the struggles her people faced, earned her their respect. She would often visit the villages, speak to the common folk, and listen to their concerns. It was in these moments, away from the palace, that Elena felt most connected to the kingdom she had sworn to protect. One evening, as they sat together in their chambers after a long day of meetings, Dorian looked at Elena with a sense of pride. "You've done more than I ever could have imagined," he said quietly, his voice filled with admiration. Elena smiled, her heart swelling with warmth. "I couldn't have done it without you. You've been my strength, Dorian. You've shown me that I'm capable of more than I ever thought." Dorian's hand reached for hers, his fingers lacing through hers with ease. "We've built this together. And together, we will continue to shape this kingdom. There is no one I'd rather have by my side." Elena's gaze softened as she looked at him. She had come a long way from the woman who had once felt powerless, invisible. She had found her place by his side, not as a passive companion, but as a partner in every sense of the word. And in that moment, she knew that they were stronger together than they had ever been apart. The future was uncertain, but Elena no longer feared it. With Dorian by her side, she knew they could face anything that came their way. They were no longer just two people in a kingdom. They were a team, united by their shared goals, their shared dreams, and their shared love for their people. "There's so much to do," Elena said softly, a spark of determination in her eyes. "But I know we can do it. Together." Dorian smiled, the warmth in his gaze undeniable. Together, he agreed. And in that moment, as they sat side by side, Elena realized that this was just the beginning. The journey they had started was far from over, but with Dorian by her side, she knew they would face it with strength, love, and an unwavering belief in each other. The future was theirs to build, and they would build it together, one decision at a time. As weeks turned into months, Elena found herself more comfortable in her new life. But with that comfort came a growing awareness of the responsibilities she had taken on. She was no longer just Dorian's mate, a title that had once felt like a fleeting dream. Now, she was his partner, not just in private, but in public as well. Together, they worked tirelessly, discussing matters of the kingdom and finding ways to make it thrive. Elena's role was no longer confined to the background. She had proven herself time and again, not only to Dorian but to the people who had once doubted her. With every decision, she grew stronger, more confident in her ability to lead. Her bond with Dorian was more than just an alliance of convenience. It was one built on mutual respect and love. They complemented each other perfectly, each filling the gaps where the other was weakest. Elena had found her voice, and Dorian had found someone who could challenge him in the best way possible. Their love, too, had deepened. There were moments of quiet, tender affection between them, small, private exchanges that made all the difference. But there were also moments of fierce determination, when they stood together against any challenge that came their way. Elena knew that Dorian had always been a powerful ruler, but now, she was helping him build a future that was even stronger, one where every decision they made was for the good of the kingdom and the people they loved. One afternoon, as they sat together in the grand library of the palace, Elena looked up from the stack of papers in front of her, her thoughts drifting. She had been immersed in matters of the kingdom for days, and while she had grown accustomed to the demands, there were times when she longed for a moment of peace. Dorian noticed her distraction and set down the paper he had been reading. "You've been working tirelessly," he said, his voice soft but filled with concern. "Perhaps it's time for a break. We've accomplished so much together. It's important to take a moment to appreciate it." Elena smiled at him, grateful for his thoughtfulness. "I suppose you're right," she replied. "It's just that there's always something more to do. The kingdom doesn't wait." Dorian's eyes softened as he leaned closer, placing a hand on hers. "No, it doesn't. But neither do we. We've come a long way, Elena. And while there's always more work to be done, we can't forget to live in the moments we've created." His words sank in, and Elena felt a sense of calm wash over her. They had done the hard work, the heavy lifting. Now, it was time to take a breath and enjoy what they had built together. She squeezed his hand in return, her heart swelling with gratitude. "You're right," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. "I've been so focused on the future that I've forgotten to enjoy the present." Dorian smiled, his expression softening. "Then let's make the most of this moment. Together." They stood from the table and walked out onto the balcony, where the late afternoon sun cast a golden glow across the gardens. The air was warm, and the sound of the wind rustling through the trees was soothing. Elena felt a deep sense of contentment settle in her chest as she looked out at the vast expanse before them. This was their kingdom, their home. And together, they had built something that would last for generations to come. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. Elena and Dorian would face it together. Their bond, their partnership, and their love would guide them through whatever challenges lay ahead. They were no longer just rulers of a kingdom. They were rulers of each other's hearts. And that, more than anything, was what would make their reign truly unbreakable. As time passed, Elena and Dorian's rule became a beacon of hope for the kingdom. The bond they shared was unbreakable, and the way they led together inspired those around them. Elena had become not only a wife and a mother, but a true leader in every sense of the word. Her wisdom, her compassion, and her fierce love for her people had made her an invaluable part of the kingdom's success. The palace, once a place of uncertainty and unfamiliarity, had become their home, a place where Elena felt truly at peace. The tension that had once clouded her heart had disappeared, replaced by a deep sense of purpose. She wasn't just the Alpha King's mate anymore. She was a force in her own right, a woman who had earned the respect of everyone around her. Dorian, too, had found a new sense of balance. While his role as the Alpha King remained as demanding as ever, he now shared it with Elena, and together they made decisions that shaped the future of their kingdom. He had never imagined that a partnership like this could exist, but Elena had shown him that strength wasn't just in dominance, it was in unity. Their relationship had grown stronger with each passing day, their love deepening as they faced the challenges of ruling together. They spent their evenings walking through the gardens of the palace, talking about the future, about their dreams, and the world they were building for their children. Elena had never thought she would experience this kind of peace, this kind of happiness. But as she stood beside Dorian, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and pink, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The following spring, Elena found herself standing before a gathering of nobles and advisors, a ceremonial gathering to celebrate the prosperity the kingdom had achieved. The garden was alive with color, the air filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers. As Elena stood next to Dorian on the balcony overlooking the courtyard, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This was their kingdom, their legacy. Together, they had built something lasting, something that would endure long after they were gone. As the evening drew on and the celebrations continued, Dorian turned to Elena, his eyes filled with admiration. "We've done it, Elena. Together, we've made this kingdom stronger than it has ever been." Elena smiled, her heart full. "No, Dorian. We've done it because we've built it together. This kingdom is as much yours as it is mine." Dorian's expression softened, and he took her hand, holding it gently in his. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said quietly. Elena leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the weight of the years they had spent together, the struggles, the triumphs, and the love they had cultivated. "And I wouldn't have done it without you," she replied. For the first time in her life, Elena truly felt at home. She wasn't just a part of the kingdom, she was a part of its heart. And with Dorian by her side, she knew that their reign would be one built on strength, love, and unity. As the stars began to twinkle in the sky above, Elena realized that this was only the beginning. The future was theirs to shape, together. With Dorian, she had found not only a partner in ruling, but a partner in life. And together, they would continue to build a kingdom worthy of their love and their people.